I've never quite understood why people only seem to think that you can't like both Digimon and Pokemon. In fact, back in primary school, everyone seemed to be as obsessed with Digimon as they were with Pokemon. Both were fairly well loved as popular fads at the time. I have a feeling that I discovered Digimon through the virtual pets first. My love affair with Pokemon couldn't have been too far behind, however, as I received Pokemon Yellow for my birthday one year, and then followed by Pokemon Gold for Christmas, either that year or the following year. While I never was able to beat Pokemon Yellow as a kid, Gold became my favourite Pokemon game at the time, and I have a lot of fond memories of playing through it. But in terms of how I feel about the more recent Pokemon games, and the growth of the franchise, along with the growth of the Digimon franchise in comparison, while I don't really watch the Pokemon anime and I haven't followed it since I was a child, I've played every single mainline video game from the franchise as I've grown up, even falling in love with the arcade game Gaole when I've been to Japan, only to mourn its death a few years ago. There was a time where I thought that I might have been finally growing out of the Pokemon franchise with how much I really just did not enjoy Sun and Moon. But then I enjoyed Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet more than I probably previously enjoyed many of the recent releases. So I guess that Sun and Moon just weren't the games for me. In terms of the side and spin-off games, I haven't really played many of them despite owning basically all of them. I did enjoy the Ranger Shadows of Almia game that I got for Christmas randomly one year, as it was something different from the other games. And while I never played the Mystery Dungeon series as a kid, I did grab it when it came to Switch a few years back, and I really enjoyed it. It was a nice spin on the formula being an isekai, where you're a human who is transported to the Pokemon world and turned into a Pokemon, and you play the entire game as a Pokemon, rather than playing it as a human like in the majority of other Pokemon games. I also enjoyed the, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it was a Pokemon game, but you were drawing Pokemon. It was called Pokemon Art Academy. There you go. That one was quite fun. I'm not an artist. I really can't draw, but I really did enjoy that game, and I kind of wish that they made more of these Pokemon Art Academy games, even as someone who can't draw and has basically no artistic ability. I really enjoyed the Pokemon Art Academy games. Not quite sure why, it just rubbed something right in my brain, I guess. However, in terms of what seems to be a point of contention for the franchise is the recent, within the last few years, the Dex cut, where not the entire roster of Pokemon appear on each of the new games. However, as a fan of the Digimon games and Digimon as a franchise, Digimon being a franchise where we're basically lucky if a game release has over 200 monsters available, I still feel like the games have more than enough mons to catch in them, but I don't really personally get the complaint about how not all 1,000+ Pokemon are available in the mainline games lately, or most of the games, and maybe that's because I'm just coming from this as a Digimon fan, but yeah, the Digimon games typically maybe 200 Digimon are on the game, anything more and it would be just a shock. There are about 1,500 Digimon in existence, or in existence as in the franchise, but none of the games have the entire roster of Digimon. So when a Pokemon game comes out and has like 400 Pokemon, that's still a lot of Pokemon to catch and to train, etc., etc. The Digimon games typically have a lot less than that, despite also having almost, 1,500, I think was the last count of Digimon characters available, so that would just be amazing just to have 400, let alone 200 available in a Digimon game. So that's something that I find is a pretty big difference between the two franchises, is that the Pokemon fans want all the Pokemon available, Digimon fans are just happy if they have a sizable amount of Digimon in their games. So that's something I've always found interesting between the two franchises. However, the Pokemon games do make me feel a little bit more greedy as a gamer. For Digimon, we're lucky if we get a port of an existing game every 3 years with a brand new game every 5, rather than Pokemon's seemingly yearly game releases with several mobile apps available, and these aren't just gachas with a lifespan of 2 to 3 years. For comparison, Pokemon Masters released, and then we had a few months later Digimon Rearise, which released just after Masters. Rearise shut down last year. Pokemon Masters is still going strong with updates. Whereas we also have Pokemon Go, which has been around since 2016, and that one has no indication of slowing down anytime soon. In terms of Digimon mobile games, we just have the Vital Bracelet, which is a kind of wearable virtual pet, kind of gamified toy, a little bit like a Fitbit for kids. It has a companion app, but you basically need a Vital Bracelet to use it, and the previous Vital Bracelet app shut down after only a few years, with the new app replacing it. So the treatment of the Digimon apps by Bandai is not as long-lasting and full of updates as for the Pokemon franchise, which has quite a lot of mobile games available that have, they've been around for quite a long time compared to Digimon mobile games, which are only typically around for maybe 2 to 3 years, which is a shame, but it makes me kind of greedy as a fan, as I mentioned. And then not to mention that the fact that we have the mainline Pokemon games in the last 2 generations have added DLC and various events with additional content. Digimon games typically just release, and that's basically that. I am a big fan of the existence of DLC in Pokemon games. While I loved Pokemon Crystal growing up, most of it was just replaying the game that I previously played and recently had already played. Which, as I get older and I have less spare time, I don't particularly want to do, nor I have the time to do it. I have never even finished Ultra Moon because, as I mentioned, I disliked Moon so much, so the third game, becoming DLC onto an existing game for $40 rather than $90, is something I definitely appreciate, especially because it increases the playability and longevity of a game. Previously, I would have also said that Pokemon games seem to lack too much emotional depth, but both with Hop's inferiority complex and imposter syndrome in Sword and Shield, and Arven caring for a weakened dog Pokemon really recently in Scarlet and Violet, both really hit me emotionally, especially Arven, as one of my dogs is a senior now and has his days where he's just a little bit weak, and seeing the days where he's stronger really makes me emotional. So playing through that and seeing Arven taking care of his injured Mabosstiff, I was kind of emotional about it. I never really expected to get that emotional about a Pokemon game. I never thought that it had that much emotional depth to it until quite recently. And then another main difference between the Digimon and Pokemon fans, it seems to be to do with the expectations that fans have. Pokemon fans seem to be consistently prepared to be let down by announcements, while Digimon fans, somehow, have never-ending optimism and unrealistically high expectations for announcements, like expecting huge virtual pet or video game announcements being in a presentation that is strictly about the anime, which is fairly separated because the anime is typically handled by Toei, and the virtual pets and video games are typically handled by Bandai and Bandai Namco. So the expectations for Digimon fans, I don't know why, but we have such high expectations all the time and are fairly consistently disappointed. Whereas the Pokemon games, every time that there's a Pokemon Presents, I feel like my Twitter is full of people just being disappointed in advance. Like, oh, it's just going to be Pokemon Go news and some TCG news maybe. And they're consistently, disappointed prior to any event, which is just hilarious to see as someone who mainly pays attention to Digimon announcements and is more active in the Digimon fandom and the Digimon side of things. It is just funny to see the comparison between the expectations that fans of Digimon and fans of Pokemon have for their respective franchises. So, overall, I love both Pokemon and Digimon and probably expect to do so for a long time. but there's still my inner child wishing for an eventual crossover between the two, like Pokemon being available on the Digimon Vital Bracelet or Digimon being added to Pokken Tournament. I doubt that any of those would end up actually happening, but I can dream, can't I? It's been a long kind of dream of like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if Agumon and Pikachu could fight? And I've always had that. I don't think that would ever happen, but it just would be pretty cool to have some kind of crossover. Especially because I just really do love both franchises. And again, I never really quite understood why people seem to think that you could only like one. You couldn't just like them both. They are not entirely dissimilar, but they're not too similar either. They both have their unique characteristics. The main similarity between them is that they are both monsters. They both have Mon in the title. We have digital monsters, we have pocket monsters. Other than that, they are fairly different, and the franchises and the releases are fairly different and separate from them. While Digimon is more of a virtual pet franchise, as that was where the roots of the franchise are, Pokemon isn't so much a virtual pet. We have had the EV-Chi, Tamagotchi Nano, and we have the Manaphy Egg, and that's about it in terms of virtual pets. And the rest of the franchise seems to be more focused on games and, I guess, the anime in some way, because the games were the root of the franchise. So they are fairly different, and I love them both for it. So those are my thoughts about Digimon and Pokemon. I've had a lot of people requesting me to talk about Pokemon, especially because I've been playing through a lot of Pokemon games with Pokemon Sleep just releasing. I've gotten back into Pokemon Go, and of course the upcoming DLC. So I've been thinking about Pokemon more than I usually have anyway. So I hope that this was informative to someone about what the differences are, the treatment, and my opinions on both these franchises. So let me know your thoughts, comments, questions, etc., in the comment section below. Like this video for the possibility that Digimon fans could maybe be a little bit less optimistic, and Pokemon fans could be a little bit more optimistic. I don't know. Subscribe if you haven't already, and if you have subscribed, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your neighbors, and of course, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!